For millions of years of the existence of our planet, humanity has spent only a few hundred years studying it, claiming that among all the animal kingdom, it is the only one granted the ability to govern the earth. However, increasingly, there is a statement that humanity is merely a household for another, more complex and invisible civilization. These beings may have planted life on Earth and have been monitoring it for hundreds of millions of years. The first contacts with them occurred thousands of years ago, but only now are people managing to record elementary messages from the unknown. Nevertheless, we are still far from deciphering these messages. Researcher of anomalous phenomena Vadim Chernobrov believes that this could be a cosmic alphabet, and a planetary intelligence is knocking on our door. The foremost place in these observations is occupied by enormous graphic imprints on the Earth, known as crop circles. This phenomenon began in 1972 when two Englishmen discovered that their field had been spoiled. A vast number of ripe ears of grain had been pressed to the ground, forming a perfect circle. Ufologists dubbed this a landing site for an alien spacecraft. The crop circles brought fame to an obscure English locality, but soon a multitude of man-made fakes appeared. With each passing year, the mysterious patterns become more complex, outpacing the imagination of the counterfeit creators. They are executed according to strict mathematical laws, and today, already 10,000 such signs have been recorded. Researchers consider them attempts to explain important messages to humanity in the language of pictograms. There is another version. The circles may be traces of underground activities of a civilization that does not seek to make contact with us. However, Vadim Chernobrov expresses doubt about these accounts, emphasizing that fear has big eyes. The first description of crop circles dates back to the 16th century when the mysterious patterns were referred to as the devil's handiwork, and people tried to avoid the ominous places. When a person looked at the ground from the board of an airplane, the circles finally received the attention they deserved from researchers and journalists. Vadim Chernobrov, studying the problems of strange markings, collected testimonies and compiled a chronology of the appearance of circles in Russia. In 1995, in the Ivanovo region, local mechanizers stumbled upon strange marks in a field during the wheat harvest. In 1996, in the Perm region, residents of Perm, arriving at their summer cottages, were shocked when circles appeared in a field after the descent of a strange glowing sphere. One of the eyewitnesses recalls, "We saw a glowing sphere that descended from above, gradually landed in the field, and then extinguished." He noted that a patch had formed in the field and he had a feeling that something was amiss. Opinions among the local residents diverged. For a small reward, the machinists promised to decorate the fields with even more intricate patterns. However, as Vadim Chernobrov points out, it cannot be. Most often, circles in the fields appear in the south of Russia, especially in regions such as Kuban and Stavropol. Over the past 20 years, more than 200 circles have been recorded in various regions of the country. Vadim Chernobrov is heading to Krasnodar Krai, where for several consecutive years someone has been drawing gigantic circles in the fields, hoping to meet the author of these impressive signs. His team, working in the public organization Cosmopoisk, has the main task of distinguishing a fake from a genuine one. All the stems in the circles must be bent, not broken. Researchers claim that genuine circles are a sample of higher mathematics and geometry. In some of them, complex theorems are encrypted, and the ears of grain are twisted in a spiral, using the same logarithmic proportions as in Fibonacci numbers or the golden ratio. In nature, one can find samples resembling intricate patterns, such as a seashell or a ram's horn. These patterns are typically laid out in two ways. One of them is called a braid, which visually resembles a woman's braid. The movements of the stems resemble the movements of the arms of a swimmer performing the breaststroke or a person braiding hair. In Russia, complex designs have not yet been observed, which, according to researchers, is a good thing, as the forgers of circles seem to be competing with each other, creating various mystical patterns. In the United States, several fantastic films have already been made about signs in the fields. However, local residents who found themselves on daytime watch have a solid background of unimagined observations. Maria Ananjeva, a correspondent for the newspaper Novorossiysk Worker, first saw the circles in the fields 3 years ago. She recalls, "What I saw ignited within me like a great sun. It struck me to the depths of my reporter's consciousness." Back then, several years ago, she saw a perfect creation and was convinced that such a thing could not have been made by Earthlings. "I thought for a long time, could this be done with a tractor? Could a cow be tied up and driven around for a long time? Impossible," she shares. The circles were of perfect shape, arranged in such a way that it seemed as if an unknown force had woven them throughout the night. Since then, every year in July, Maria comes to the area near Armavir, hoping to see and film those who create whimsical patterns in the Kuban fields. Unfortunately, no one knows where the next pattern will appear, perhaps right here where she stands or a few kilometers away. To increase the chances of observation, enthusiasts of cosmic exploration divide the presumed territory into sectors and set up patrols. While they prepare for the night watch, Maria decided to talk to the locals, as they had called the researchers. Artash Sanakchan, an Armavir farmer, moved here several years ago after witnessing something that shook his imagination. In 1996, while visiting his sister, he and relatives and friends decided to admire Armavir from a mountain. That evening, as twilight descended upon the city, suddenly a strange flash illuminated the space. "I thought, what was that?" recalls Artash. He describes how a large sphere appeared in the steppe, flying low, almost to the trees. For a second, Artash and his friends froze in fear, and then they rushed after it. "We ran after it," he says. The sphere disappeared behind the trees, and despite all efforts they could not find it. Where a huge sphere could have vanished was completely unclear, he continues. It was just there and then seemed to have vanished into thin air. Leaping onto horses, Artash and his friend continued to comb the forest, while the others drove away from the crash site. In a wheat field at the edge of the forest, the pursuers saw a circle of clear shape, as if cut by high-precision weaponry, yet not a single ear of wheat was broken. There were no signs of fire, explosion, or tornado at that place. After that, several people told Artash about the appearance of the mysterious sphere, but he no longer risks chasing the unknown. "I feel that these are some symbols, encrypted messages," says Irina Platoshkina, a journalist and expedition participant. "I believe that these are indeed some messages, that someone wants to tell us something that we do not yet understand, but very much want to understand." 100 meters from her, Irina from Moscow stands guard, a permanent member of the expedition. Irina considers her first encounter with the unexplained circle to be fateful. She recalls how this circle was so perfectly even that the ears of wheat lay against each other in perfect symmetry. She had the feeling that creating something like that by human hands was impossible. It seemed to be the work of something higher, beyond human understanding. No one on Earth knows how to bend ears of grain in mere seconds without breaking them. This can only be done with the help of increased radiation or chemical poisons, but in such a case, it would not be possible to create a smooth curve. If the ears are affected chemically, they would bend multiple times in different places at various angles. Irina also notes that attention should be paid to the weaving inside the circles. Now, having received news of new circles, she does everything possible to embark on an expedition. This time, she hitchhikes to the Krasnodar region. Analyzing the testimonies of local residents, she realizes that the appearance of the circle depends on the month. It is July, and the time, the beginning of the second hour of the night. Sergei Drushko, a researcher of circles and fields, is going on an expedition to the Krasnodar region. At the border of the city of Armavir, circles form at a strictly defined time. He seeks answers to questions about what they mean and who is making them in the wheat fields. Drushko notes that their ambush in the Krasnodar fields would make no sense if he had not met with specialists in pictograms. These experts see in the giant drawings not just meaningful text, but specific warning messages. Geneticist Pyotr Goryaev, who has been studying the circles for more than 20 years, shares his experience. He has visited the circles in England, New Zealand, as well as in the fields of Canada and America. During this time, he has understood one important thing. Those who leave the drawings are not trying to convey anything. They are examining humanity. Goryaev, Doctor of Biological Sciences and academician of the Russian Academy of Medical and Technical Sciences, asserts that the mind is eternal and its evolution spans billions of years. He compares people to cockroaches in a jar, asking the question, will you communicate with cockroaches? Of the thousands of circles on planet Earth, the geneticist considers only two messages to be the most important. Vladimir Melnikov, president of the Academy of Informationology and Applied Ufology, talks about how a message was drawn in the English locality of Chimbleton, which was transmitted through a powerful electromagnetic stream. This message was directed towards constellations located 24,000 light-years away. In 1974, French microbiologist and astronomer Carl Sagan sent a coded binary message to the constellation M9, containing information about the history of planet Earth and a diagram of human DNA. According to calculated data, this message was supposed to reach its destination only after 50,000 light-years, and the inhabitants of planet Earth were expected to receive a response only after the same interval of time. However, the message arrived after 27 years, causing shock among scientists. Goryaev, as a geneticist, asserts that not everything is encoded in the DNA molecule. He emphasizes that the aliens have demonstrated that humanity is mistaken, and their genetics do not reflect the truth. They showed their own DNA molecule, which, in Goryaev's opinion, calls into question the decoding of human DNA, which he believes is a fiction. More precisely, it is merely 2% of what could be decoded. Here they show that their DNA functions not only in the same way as ours, but they also apply a completely different principle of DNA operation, of which we are not even aware. The geneticist believes that extraterrestrial intelligence has long possessed the complete formula of our DNA, but considers that we are not yet ready to use it, as it could doom the human race, capable of moving through space, controlling objects with their gaze, and, most importantly, compressing time. Scientist Goryaev believes that the message warns us to be cautious with transgenic engineering and not to disrupt the course of evolution. These messages come to us not only from crop circles. Stonehenge, it seems to me, is also part of this story. It is also circles. This is my hypothesis because they can explain what this is for. It is believed to be an ancient observatory of the ancient English. This time crop circles, but instead of them there are stones arranged in concentric circles. Stonehenge or the Hanging Stones are not an opera and not even a musical. This is how the English named the ancient cyclopean structure, which has been attributed fantastic origins and properties for many centuries. One Russian woman who visited the stones of Stonehenge felt their strange influence on her life and began to worry about what was happening to her. Oksana Polovtseva is a fairly well-off resident of the capital, an economist by profession. All her life she considered herself a rational person and never believed that something inexplicable could happen to her. She felt that she had to travel to a completely different country and was ready to pay money. When Oksana arrived at the agency, she was told that they had made a mistake. There was no tour package, but there were the last 2 spots available. Oksana and her friend were offered to go to England. The first excursion was to Stonehenge. At the stone blocks, they took the usual tourist photographs and listened to the guide's stories. Oksana felt embarrassed, and suddenly she became sharply unwell. I got a headache, and I felt an awful longing. I thought that perhaps it was worth waiting a bit and then we would leave. This excursion passed for me overall without any particular impressions. I made a couple of circles around Stonehenge and returned to the bus. Stonehenge is a system of concentric circles with a diameter of more than 100 meters, marked on the ground by earthworks, pits, and huge megalithic stones. The most astonishing part of the structure is 5 trilithons, consisting of paired stone blocks, covered on top by heavy slabs. According to the latest data, the emergence of Stonehenge dates back to approximately 2,965 years before our era. Upon returning to Russia, Oksana developed the film and noticed a strange object in one of the photographs. Look closely. Above the head of my conversation partner hovered an unidentified flying object. She took almost 50 shots, but this object is present only in one of them. Seeing this photo, Oksana realized that after visiting Stonehenge, she was tormented by strange sensations. Some of my acquaintances began to prepare for a trip to Egypt. They were planning to go with family and child, and, they were good acquaintances. We discussed Egypt. I shared my impressions, and they were very happy that they were going to warm countries, as it had been cold for a long time here. And suddenly I had some kind of premonition, and I said, you shouldn't go there. The acquaintances decided that I was just envious. But a week later, Oksana learned that her friend's child had fallen ill, and they had to cancel the trip. Rumors that Polovtseva predicts the future quickly spread. Unfortunately, Oksana only sees negative information. Sergey, even now when I look at you, I have a voice inside me saying that I don't want to tell you anything because you will leave now. Recently, she suddenly realized very clearly that she needed to get to the circles. This summer, Polovtseva plans to go to Chilbultana. She believes that she will be able to become an ordinary person again. Suddenly, an irresistible desire arose to be in those fields where the circles were. Correspondent Maria Ananjeva says, "I never thought about this. I always considered myself a clear-thinking and rational person." Expectations in the Kuban space continued. Last night, when the clock struck 1:23, nothing happened. However, as noted by the researcher of anomalous phenomena Vadim Chernobrov, if we have seen nothing, that is still no reason to assert that it does not exist. Currently, specialists from the space search are preparing to take measurements to determine whether there has been extraterrestrial presence here. Usually, researchers use several devices, such as an infrared radiation detector and a Geiger counter. It is precisely with their help that one can establish whether there are circles nearby, adds Chernobrov. Experts assert that an abundance of ozone is a sure sign of the appearance of circles. The air has indeed become fresher, notes Ananjeva. She also mentions that the best tester is domestic livestock. I am interested in the place over there beyond the forest, but no matter how hard I try, an ordinary horse refuses to go there, and it is impossible to drive there by car. That means there is something there. Next in the program, unique footage filmed during the expedition is presented. How many underground beings are disguised as harmless trampled canvases, wonders the host Sergei Drushko, who investigates the phenomenon of crop circles. In 2001, Earthlings received a response to their request in space. In England, the inhabitants of the planet were given a detailed decoding of our DNA and instructions for expanding their own capabilities, he reports. During the expedition to the Krasnodar region, Drushko discovers that true circles are those where not a single ear of grain is broken inside the figure, and the plants are braided into a braid. Another sleepless night has passed. I still could not reach the site. No one has seen the circles either, shares Ananjeva. There was indeed some strange glow, but I believe it is reflections from city lights. Her colleagues prepare for new expectations and argue about the meaning of these messages. Actually, these are not aliens, they are our superplanets, asserts the researcher of crop circles and dolmens, Alexander Chutkov. The so-called poly-intelligent entities or semi-intelligent entities. It is possible that these are organisms that, by the way, a well-known researcher in Italy called Litvia's quitters. One strange thing happened at night. My car refused to start, says Chetkov. As a motorist, I am, of course, upset, but as a researcher, not at all. A battery failure is a sure sign of the proximity of time X. His assumptions are confirmed by expedition participant Alexei Baskakov, who also encountered a similar misfortune. In one place, I saw a glowing pillar behind the forest belt, he recalls. I think we should go take a look. It is interesting to wonder what is there. At the nearest turn, he turned towards the forest strip. When I started to approach, the motorcycle stalled. The guy could not start the motorcycle for a very long time. Only after half an hour having rolled the machine 1 kilometer away from the strange place did I start the engine. Out of curiosity, he decided to return, but the motorcycle stalled again. In total, I rode about 30 kilometers around it. In 6 places, the road led in that direction, and everywhere the motorcycle stalled. I just could not get close. Despite this, the thrill of the explorer did not leave him. Eventually, he decided to leave the motorcycle and approach the glow on foot. The 2-kilometer walk was worth it. I found a circle, only about 30 meters in diameter. One circle, nothing more. I did not know of any research organizations that were there. He looked at it himself and it piqued my interest. Sometimes I envy those researchers whose objects have long existed, do not disappear anywhere, and allow for thorough study. Even among the messages, one can find such calm places. This is the Peruvian Nazca Plateau. Take a look at these photographs. Some scientists call this place the oldest spaceport for aliens. This is the most well-known hypothesis regarding the origin of the gigantic figures on the stone expanses of Peru. And this is our compatriot Alabella Canova. She first saw photographs of the plateau 30 years ago. Since then, this woman has been studying this amazing phenomenon. Here is the surface of the desert itself. The figures were created by removing stones from the sandy surface. The bare sandy surface appears due to the light substrate, on which the images of drawings and lines are visible. Alabella Khan, a radiophysicist and ufologist, has been studying the figures on the Nazca Plateau for more than 20 years, and claims that they were created by a flow of unknown energy. The figures are simply cleared from the stone surface, but historians, for example, believe that this was done manually. Alabella Khan has scientifically proven that a person could not create 13,000 lines from 700 geometric sites. If he were to take this on, it would take 10,000 people 100,000 years. Something was created with the help of air and energy impact. If 100,000 people were to perform such work manually and at the same time move around, all of it would simply be trampled, which does not align with reality. The researcher believes that information about the solar system is embedded in Nazca. Apparently, the world is more complex, and perhaps there exists some parallel world in which Earth is somehow included in 2 systems. This third center is common to 2 systems, the solar system and some other one which is indicated here. The aerial assessment of the Nazca Plateau was only accomplished by pilot Marina Popovic. This year, she visited this unusual place at the invitation of the government of Peru. Test pilot Marina Lavrentievna was entrusted with flying over the plateau. Her opinion on the purpose of Nazca is unequivocal. Of course, it is an alphabet. It seems to me that it is a cosmic alphabet, that is, a higher intelligence, or perhaps an extraterrestrial intelligence, is trying to reach out to us. Marina Popovich. First-class test pilot, Colonel of the Air Force, 100-time world record holder. Author of the book NLO on Planet Earth. I also said that these are landing strips, long landing strips, for example. On the edge of one of them, there is a depiction of a monkey, approximately 40 meters long. Or, for instance, there is a lyre, or let's say some kind of bird. These are all grandiose scales. I promised Marina Lavrentievna that seeing the Nazca drawings with my own eyes is just a matter of time for me. The Embassy of Peru is already considering my application. But for now, the space search team is on duty in the fields of Armavir night after night. Fate has gifted me a meeting with a woman who believes that the best opportunity to encounter the inexplicable is to rise into the sky. Jana grew up in a family of pilots. Her father regretted that there was no one to pass on his skills, but when his daughter begged him to let her take the controls, he agreed. Now, Jana Balueva is a pilot of the third generation and speaks with reverence about her father. He was testing an engine. The engine was on such a device that was very poorly secured. Unstable, Jana Balueva, pilot. Experience, 21 years. He approached to adjust the engine's RPM, and the entire stand along with the propeller began to lean towards him. Since he had good reflexes, having previously practiced boxing, he quickly managed to raise his hand, otherwise he could have lost his head. The test pilot convinced the medical commission that he could control the aircraft with one hand. But several years ago, Jana lost her father under strange circumstances. She associates his death with the activity of an unknown civilization. Her father never believed in such forces. When he encountered enormous drawings on the ground, he explained them as the work of village boys. However, Anatoly did not succumb even to obvious things. On the territory of the airfield, lights were often observed, glowing little lights that resembled stars. But it was difficult to say, for the star was stable and stood in the sky, while something else was happening here. A movement, as if someone was truly watching all of this. On the day of the death of the top-class pilot, who could operate the winged machine with one hand, he furrowed his brow for some reason. Nevertheless, he did not refuse to conduct tests on the aircraft that had returned from repairs. A tragedy occurred during the landing approach. At the time of the father's death, a certain eye appeared, a gaze that opened and then closed. The day before the tragedy, a flock of eagles had gathered. This was strange, for eagles do not fly in flocks. They usually prefer solitude. This moment seemed like a warning about something. On the third or fourth day after the death, someone found an eagle without one wing. The girl, hoping to see her father, had heard much about people who had returned from alien captivity. Today, Jana continues her search for mysterious symbols and agreed to take another researcher with her, hoping that he would bring her luck. They were under Armavir and observed a glow at an azimuth of 280 degrees, which indicated northwest. This raised suspicions about the circle. Yesterday, from a high point, they noticed something at visibility level. This area required more detailed investigation. Further in the program, questions arose about why and who had closed the camera lens during the flight, and whether the circles could destroy the population of Earth. Signs of penetration into our planet were noted. Sergei Druzhko was searching for an answer to the question, who and why leave circles in the fields? In 2001, he managed to find out that extraterrestrial civilizations had sent a decoding of human DNA. While on an expedition in the Krasnodar Krai, the program host flew over the circles. He showed sensational footage that had never before been captured in the country. In the left corner of the frame, circles appeared in the fields, and at that very second, a white cloud emerged from nowhere, attempting to cover them. When they turned around and approached the circles again, there was not a single cloud in the sky, but as they got closer to the drawing, a milky cloud reappeared, obscuring the figures. None of the scientists could explain this phenomenon. He had only one assumption. They did not want this phenomenon to be filmed in detail. The collected facts initially caused complete confusion, and then he decided not to complicate things. He compared it to the work of surgeons and tattoo artists, who mark the area of intervention with a marker before starting their work. He believed that the circles were marks of penetration into the Earth's crust. He managed to find a witness who confirmed this version. Evgeny Novikov, a writer and journalist, claimed that he was the only person in the world who had seen and filmed an unidentified underground object. This happened in the Tver region about 2 years ago. A small object, possibly 20 centimeters, was captured on camera, which suddenly emerged from the ground and began to move across the turf and through the road, cutting through the hard soil. It moved quite quickly, sometimes diving deep into the earth and then reappearing on the surface, resembling a periscope of a submarine that emerges not from the sea, but specifically from the ground, overcoming all obstacles with extraordinary ease. Evgeny, armed with a spade, began to dig at the spot where something had just surfaced. However, just a few minutes later, the spade broke, so hard was the ground. He reflects on the idea that our planet might be an object of study by some civilizations or forces. In his opinion, this object possesses powerful mobility and can move through various environments, in the air, underwater, and underground. Evgeny calls it earthworm, which may be studying underground and underwater structures. Evgeny Novikov is convinced that Western television will pay him a lot of money for his footage, so he did not even allow a copy to be made. He believes that the prospect of large sums of money is his fantasy, but otherwise has no reason not to trust him. Moreover, he had already obtained similar footage from Altai. Among the few seconds that the viewer managed to capture, one can see something springing up from the ground and then disappearing again. This raises the question, what lies beneath the Earth? None of the researchers have managed to penetrate deeper into the Earth than 10,000 meters, while the distance to the center of the planet is more than 6,000 kilometers. There is a theory that the circles in the fields are merely points of penetration, where millions of alien saboteurs can appear in just a few seconds. The first evidence of this began to emerge at the beginning of the year when Indian newspapers started discussing the emergence of alien bases on the border between India and China. Kongala is a low mountain pass in the Himalayas located in disputed territory claimed by both countries. According to some researchers, aliens decided to establish their underground base right here, as this is where the Eurasian and Indian tectonic plates converge. This is one of the few regions on the planet where the thickness of the Earth's crust is approximately twice the average. The double thickness allows for the creation of underground bases deep within tectonic plates. It is likely that the frequent appearance of circles specifically in the foothills of the Caucasus and the Krasnodar region is connected to the possibility of camouflage in the mountainous terrain. Observing their behavior, one can notice that they act very cautiously. They could simply come out and state that they are doing this only in the sea. It is impressive. The Earth becomes a testing ground where they observe life for hundreds of millions of years. They could experiment both underground and underwater, anywhere. Evgeny mentions the Moscow region, as well as places such as Lake Ladoga and Sosnovy Bor, emphasizing that researchers are wondering why aliens settled deep within the Earth. Some believe that the fantastic tale by Herbert Wells, The War of the Worlds, may not be so unrealistic after all. It is quite possible that one day the Earth will find itself in a state of undeclared war. In that case, the scenario could develop in two directions. The aliens possess technologies that allow them to enter the Earth's solid crust without deforming it and to emerge from mountains. There is destruction of the opponent's habitat, its material resources, the armaments of cities, as well as changes in the planet's temperature regime and the composition of the atmosphere and water. These processes are already being recorded, and many light phenomena are observed underwater. This may indicate the presence of intelligent beings and underwater settlements that create multi-kilometer circles rotating underwater. There is also a second option: the destruction of the opponent and its living military force, while preserving all that has been accumulated by the opposing civilization. Vadim Chernobrov, a researcher of anomalous phenomena, shares his thoughts on hidden bases that may exist underground and underwater. He claims that these bases are intended for concealment from human eyes at moments when their energy resources are depleted. He mentions a controversial project proposed by a scientist from New Zealand, which suggests penetrating the Earth's depths using a nuclear explosion. According to him, the explosion creates an artificial fracture into which 100,000 tons of molten metal are poured. Under the influence of gravity, the crack in the Earth's crust should widen, and the flowing metal will push ahead a research probe the size of an orange. Chernbrov emphasizes that the result of this frightening operation could lead to both an astonishing discovery and a universal catastrophe. He wonders whether, in such a case, an unknown civilization might come to humanity's aid, or whether it would bring about the downfall of overly curious humanity.